Now that I'm actually doing some serious finish work inside my house, I thought I would go through my method of taping drywall. What's special about my method is that you wind up doing very little sanding, or at least I do. I only use this sanding block like this, and I only do the inside corners and around the receptacles usually. Normally nothing else needs any more sanding. Just prime it and paint it and it's done. Now it does take a little bit of practice to get there, and it does take longer than if you're going to do like 3 coats and then sand it. But I think that the extra work that you have to do more than compensates for the fact that you don't have to sand it in the end and make that big mess. This is going to be a series of shorter videos where I'll concentrate on one aspect of the job, and then the next one will cover the next thing, and so on and so forth, until I go through everything. I figure that's the best way to tackle this subject. That way I'll be able to quickly edit the videos and upload them as I get them done. All of the work is going to happen here in this room. This is my new living room that I just finished doing the ceiling on. I always tape the ceiling first. It's the hardest to do, and therefore I want to get it out of the way. Leaves the walls as the easy part to do next. The focus of this video will be the tools that I use to do the work. I primarily use a 4-inch putty knife like this, and I also use a trowel. This is a good drywall trowel. I think it's around 14 inches long, maybe 4 inches wide. And I've had this for years. I use this generally instead of a traditional hawk like this. You can use this. I don't really like to use this because, first of all, it's too bulky, it's too big. I really can't do anything else with it, whereas my trowel, I can actually trowel over the seams and smooth everything out with that, so it not only holds the compound, but it's a second tool that I can use. There are other options also. There's a mud box. That's just an aluminum tray that you put the mud in, and then you typically use a couple of size knives with that, a 4-inch and say an 8-inch. I use this 4-inch knife for quite a lot of the work, and the first thing I do when I buy a new one, this one's pretty old, it's getting old, is I take it and I round over the corners slightly on the edge here with a sanding block like this. It doesn't have to be very much, it just needs to break the sharpness off that corner. You'll have to do that periodically too as the knife wears down. These actually wear out if you do enough of this stuff. And the reason why I do that is that when you're in the corner with the tape, if the corner of your knife is too sharp, it'll actually cut the tape. You're smoothing it out, you cut the tape, then you got to peel that out again and put new tape in. So it's always a good idea to just ease it over and make it so that it's not sharp and it won't cut. It's also handy to have some kind of a mixer. I like to thin down the mud after I get the first coat on so that I can get it on thinner. And this makes mixing it up easy. This one is for paint, but I find it really works well with drywall mud as well. I put it in my battery power drill actually, and I stir up the stuff. I don't use it very often, but I also have a 6-inch putty knife, and that's good for doing corners to smooth them out a little bit more if they need it. I use 2 different types of tape when I'm doing this. I use the traditional paper tape on the inside corners and some flat seams, and then I use the mesh tape here on almost all of my flat seams. It's a lot faster. You put this on, this sticks on, and then you can mud right over top of it. Whereas this one here, you actually have to lay in a bit of mud and set this in and then go over top of it again. You need a pair of snips to cut corner beads with. They don't have to be anything fancy, they just need to be able to cut the metal. If the drywall is installed with screws, you'll want to have either a screwdriver or a drill or impact driver to set the screws in below the surface. If some are sticking out, you'll find that often. You go around putting a coat on the screws and you'll find it's sticking out a little bit too far. Use this to torque them in. If the drywall is installed with nails, you can use the end of your knife here, as long as it's got a metal cap on it like this one does, And I really don't recommend buying ones like this that don't have that metal cap, because you use this for other things other than pounding in the odd nail. If you've got a place where a screw was driven in and it missed the stud, and then you take the screw out, the paper is puckered out there, then you just tap that in with the end of your putty knife and run some compound in to fill up the hole. Something else you're going to need is a source of good lighting. I've got a couple of these clip lights that I've got placed around the room. Generally, when you're in a room that's being taped, there aren't any fixtures in the ceiling that are ready to light up the room, so you'll need a couple of these. I also need a step ladder to get up on to do the ceiling. I find it handy to have a bucket, a short bucket like this, for doing the seams on the walls. I find that this is the right height to stand on to get up to the top. I don't really need to get up on the ladder. It's also easier to kick around the floor and move to the area I want to work in. The bucket that I use as a step stool is an empty mud bucket. I buy the compound in those buckets. I generally don't buy in boxes anymore. I find them too inconvenient. They're not really a whole lot cheaper than the buckets either. The only downside of the buckets is that you have to get rid of the buckets, but that's usually not a big deal either. I open it up, I mix it up with the mixer, and I put it on top of a 5-gallon pail that's got primer in it. So that's at the right height, or a convenient height anyway, to scoop out some as I need it.